This is the Simpit. I'm your host, Shaun Cole, and today we are here to check out the all-new Moza Racing SGP Sequential Shifter. I get that right? SGP? Yeah, it's an SGP shifter. This is their new, we'll call it budget shifter. It goes for $129, which is very reasonable in the grand scheme of shifters, and it is all-metal construction. So you can see it's a good-looking shifter, and we're going to go ahead and cover some of the features. I mentioned it's all metal. I think it's almost all aluminum, to be more specific, or if you want to be a jerk about it. I don't think it really matters much. A little bit lighter than if it was steel, but I don't think that'll affect its performance. Things that make this, or that are important about this shifter, is it does have a few adjustments. So when I think of a low-priced $129 shifter, I don't expect a whole lot, to be honest with you. In this case with the Moza, you do have a height adjustment. So you have 64 millimeters of height. So I can put this shifter handle 64 millimeters higher than it is, and we'll go ahead and see if we need it higher or the way it is when we test it. Other features that are nice is this is a replaceable shifter or handle, and I do like this metal handle with the little silver grooves, but it is a 12 millimeter threaded rod, which is standard to most shifter arms, so you can put anything you want on there as long as you buy it yourself. Other adjustments that can be made that are really critical is the tension adjustment. So I went ahead and put an Allen adjustment on this already and cranked it up, and you can make it so stiff it almost doesn't want to move. And then I made it pretty light, and you can do it with a few fingers, so it's actually pretty adjustable in that respect. Other features are there are two backlit buttons. So you've got these two extra buttons. I mean, the more the merrier when it comes to buttons. I don't know if I need buttons down on my shifter, but an extra tool is never going to hurt anybody and certainly nothing to complain about. And then the last feature to really talk about before we get this onto our rig and test it is this little lever here. So this lever actually has a purpose, which I thought it was just pointless when I first saw the shifter. I'm like, what's that for? Is it just there for effect or look? No, as it turns out, this is a quick way to get into neutral or reverse. So we're going to see how that works out. I can see in rally driving, there have been many times I've looped it, ended up with my wall, my car kissed up against the wall. And you need to get from fifth gear all the way to reverse. And on a sequential, that is a whole lot of clicks. We might be able to just do this, get into reverse, back up the car, let go, and be back in gear. So again, we're going to see how that plays out on track, and I am dying to know how it works. It could be a maker or breaker when it comes to this shifter. Other thing I didn't mention is you have two options when you're plugging it into your computer. You've got your USB plug, so you can go directly into the computer, or you've got your phone style, your RJ45 data cable here. And with this, you can plug this into the Moza, the more modern Moza bases. So we're going to go ahead and do that route and plug it right into our R9, which should be kind of cool. Beyond that, I think the only thing we really need to cover before we get down to driving is the mounting or installation. You can see you've got a bunch of threaded holes for M6 threads. You can bolt that to any deck that has corresponding holes, or you drill them for it. Or you've got the pass-through holes, any nut and bolt. You could do it into profile tubing if you needed to, or through any drilled surface. So real simple when it comes to installation, and it should be pretty strongly mounted with the robust all-metal construction. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. We're going to get it mounted up onto the rig. We're going to get the Moza software installed, and then we're going to see how it performs out on track. So as you can see, we have the SGP shifter all mounted on our rig. It was really easy. It was just putting two bolts through the bottom plate directly into those threaded holes, and it was mounted really nicely and firmly, very easily. When it came down to the software, I already had Moza Pit House installed on my system, so I didn't have to do anything there, but you would just download that from their website, get that installed, and then there might be a little automated firmware update depending on how old your software or your hardware is. And then it's pretty much up and running. There's not a lot you have to do. You don't have to calibrate it. It's just they're ready to go. We have plugged this in with the RJ45, so I'm going directly into my R12. I think I mentioned R9. Went with the R12 base, so it's directly into that, and that's definitely one of the good things about this. If you're in the Moza family, it's a USB saver, but we could have gone directly into the computer. It would all functionally work the same way. So that pretty much gets us to the point where we're ready to drive and tell you how it feels. So now before we even get started or get out on track, let's go ahead and go through and talk about a few things. So I have adjusted it to the higher position. I think I preferred it in the lower position. You have 64 millimeters of adjustment in a few different positions. I think I actually liked it down in that low spot that I did most of my testing with. This is probably a little bit higher, and it takes this out of play as far as making it be within reach. It's got a metal handle, and it does have a good amount of comfort, but if you were looking for a soft handle, it definitely isn't. That's all aluminum, and it feels like it. It's cold like an aluminum, but it does have a comfortable feel. There are no sharp edges, and I've reached out and hit it, and I haven't had anything that like hurt my hand with it, so that part's good. You can see here with the full height, we do have a teeny bit of play left and right. It's not real noticeable in its action, so when I'm out there driving, actually going through the gears, I'm not feeling that wiggle at all. It's just there so you can see, and maybe that's what's part of the play, and it might be affected also by how much tension you've put on the shifter. Now, it is an inexpensive shifter, so the indent isn't quite as noticeable as some of the more high-end shifters. You don't have an adjustment as far as range goes, so it is what it is, other than having a little bit of range from really, really light to, let's call it, medium light pressure. It's definitely not super heavy duty. All right, other things, we have this. Now, I have not figured out how to make this. Now, Moza says that I can use this to maybe shift into reverse or neutral. I've tried iRacing, I've tried WRC, I've tried Assetto Corsa. None of those allowed for it to be mapped that way. So like right here in the rallycross cars, I have it mapped as toggle my windshield wipers. And that gets me to another point. We have these extra buttons down here, which are nice. I can change the colors, which is going to help with the memory. So when I have a wheel like this and I have so many buttons, I have to admit, I start to forget what every single button on my wheel does sometimes. And I find just like the changing the backlit colors or being able to change the labels on buttons, these are the types of things that help me remember what certain buttons do. I don't have to think about it when I'm doing 200 miles an hour. Well, having these, it's like having an extra button box. I got 2 extra buttons right here. It's going to be really easy to remember what I mapped them for. Maybe it's going to be a pit limiter or an exit the car. Or in this case, I made this toggle my windshield wipers, which in rally racing is really awesome. So I've got the Moza handbrake. We're doing a little bit of rallycross. Let's get out on track. You can hear that click. It is a good sound, so you get a good sound and a decent amount of feel. It's not as strong as some other shifters when it comes to that indentation, but you can hear the amount of click, so it's not like there's nothing letting you know. There is a good amount of feel and a good amount of audible sensation of each click. But with that, it is still lightweight when you compare it to some of the other handbrakes, some of the more higher end handbrakes. I find the range to be a really good amount of range, so even with this longer arm, it extends it a little bit longer. With the shorter, with it down 64 millimeters, it definitely does make it a shorter range, but I wouldn't call it a long or a short throw. I think in the world of sequential, I'd call this about normal or what you'd expect it to be, and that it works really well. It feels robust. I mean, I mentioned a little bit of wiggle. It's not too much. It's not bothersome amount of wiggle. And for the most part, it does feel like it's going to handle thousands and thousands or millions of these clicks whatsoever. I don't have any binding action, so right now I have it a little on that lighter adjustment. I don't have it as heavy as I did, but I noticed that when I did crank up the tension, that it started to get almost like a little bit of friction bind. So there's definitely a limitation to how much you can adjust the strength. So if you're looking for a really, really heavy duty intent, something that really takes some pop or some movement, this is definitely not that shifter. This is going to be for some quicker shifts and more on the basic level. Now, at that price point, all metal construction, feels really robust. You've got the extra buttons, so there are some things that really do give it a little bit of bang for buck even at that low price point, but definitely not without the heavy adjustment of the range of motion. There are some features that aren't there comparing it to some higher end shifters that I've tested over time. But all in all, it's a good effort. I think it looks good. I think it matches the Moza family, so you can see how it matches the handbrake really well, and they look good together, and it is affordable. And again, if you're plugging it directly into the base, you've got that whole other advantage of it being a USB saver. So instead of needing to buy an extra hub or use every single USB slot on your computer, this is going to go with the handbrake into the wheel, with the pedals into the wheel, and all plug into your PC with just one USB, which is going to be a big deal for some people for sure who don't have motherboards with a lot of USB extensions. The handle is replaceable. I like the metal handle. It doesn't bother me. Some people are going to want something softer. It's a 12 millimeter threaded post, so basically I believe that's the same as most automotive shifter handles, so you would be able to change that out if you wanted. But for the amount of money, I think it's actually a really comfortable and good looking handle. I think it matches and suits the shifter really well and gives it a good automotive look and feel, which could round out your sim rig rather nicely. So I think that's everything I can tell you about how it works out on track, and now we'll get down to summarizing things with our final thoughts on the SGP shifter. Well, I think I've told you everything that I can think of when it comes to the SGP shifter by Moza Racing, or at least I've covered all the most important details when it comes to driving. But to make sure it's perfectly clear, let's break it down with the good, the not so good, and the bottom line. Starting off with the good, and that being a good price. USB direct or into the wheel. Easy mounting. Extra backlit buttons. Adjustable length. Made to last. Adjustable tension. And now on to the not so good. It is very lightweight pressure. Trigger is just a button. RJ45 cable too short. And now on to the bottom line. At $129, the SGP shifter is really an entry-level or a beginner shifter. Let's face it, you can spend 2, 3, 4, 10 times as much on a shifter, and yes, you're going to get a lot more performance, you're going to get a lot more exotic parts, but essentially this shifter gets the job done. And I think, like I say many times on the show, it comes down to what is your reasoning for a shifter. If you're on a really tight budget with a really budget setup and you just want the fun of having a sequential shifter, then at $129 you're not going to break the bank. Now, if like using a sequential shifter is your main way of driving, like your rig is built around that type of car or that type of driving, well then you might want to spend a little bit more to be able to get it a little more tailored to your exact needs, because I'd call you a high-end user. Then it really just comes down to budget. So when I think of the pros or the good and not so good list, there are a few things on there that I definitely want to address. Let's start with the not so good list and the things that bother me. The lightweight tension, it's adequate. It's not like it's so lightweight that you just hit it and accidentally shifts. There's a good amount of pressure. It's just that detent isn't as significant as other high-end shifters. Another one, that trigger. This is supposed to be able to get me into neutral and reverse, and technically it will if the game supports it. So it's really just a button. It's no different than pressing this button right here, or button on your steering wheel. It is a button that is mapped in game. So if the game supports direct button to reverse or a direct button to neutral, then it's going to work. Otherwise, it's like having a third button on the shifter, which isn't so bad, but it at least lets me remember. Like I said, I use this for windshield wiper toggle. So if it's something that I really want to remember what it does, it works really rather well for that. And then the last thing on the not so good list was the RJ45 cable. It's really kind of short. So when I think about wrapping it from the base down around the edge of my rig over to the shifter and up, I didn't have enough length. And you know me, I like really good, really clean wiring on my rig, and it just kind of prevented me from doing that perfectly like I'd like. I could probably replace that cable out pretty well. When I think of the good list, most of those items are really based on the price point. It's a good amount of shifter for the money. I like being able to adjust that height. I do like being able to adjust the tension even though it's lightweight. And I definitely like the extra backlit buttons, and being able to change the color just makes it that much better. So ultimately, it is a good shifter for the money. I think when you think of other shifters on the market, you can get an Amazon shifter for just under $100, so this is only $30 more. When you get those other features like the backlit button or the ability to be a USB saver and plug it directly into your base, I think those features are definitely worth that extra money, especially if you're in the Moza ecosystem. So at the end of the day, is this my favorite shifter in the world? No, I don't even think it's actually designed to be. Again, it's a starter shifter. I'm running some very high-end equipment. So when I think what I have available to me or what my budget allows for my sim rig, this probably wouldn't meet the requirements. But at the same time, it's a great shifter for the money, and for somebody who's just trying to get a shifter on their rig and not break the bank, I think it'd be hard to do a lot better than that. So I think that tells you, or I hope that tells you everything that you need to know about the SGP Shifter by Moza Racing. Hopefully you enjoyed this show. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you can find out when our next video comes out. And thank you for watching. This is the Simpit. I'm Shaun Cole, and I'll see you on the track.